Okay, it is Friday, November 2nd, 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, and I am Professor Wright, Richard Wright, here with your Week 6 lecture. This is the final lecture of the quarter. We set it for this special time because of the fact that the quarter actually ends on Tuesday, and want to make sure that you weren't getting the lecture on the day that the quarter ends, because that wouldn't make sense. So I indicated earlier that the lecture for week 6 would be today. So let me get right into sharing my screen. Okay, as you can see, you see the information that you normally see is down at the bottom. Let's go all the way to the bottom. You see that the final lecture will take place today at 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And you see the previous lectures already there. Okay? So I'm going to go right to week 6. So juvenile subsystems of criminal justice. You should read chapter 13 of criminal justice. I will be sending you the PowerPoint for that after this lecture is over. A brief introduction. No, I did. I already sent it to you. I sent it to you when I sent week 5, so you should have it already. And then complete the activity lecture note, juvenile justice system, and practice activity. And then the lecture taking place right now, your discussion assignment, comparing the juvenile and adult systems, your initial post and reply post are both due for week 6 now. Week 6. Don't be confused with what you still have to do tomorrow for week 5. I'll do Tuesday, and that's the last day of this T1 quarter at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Also, there is your final exam, which is timed. And I'm going to just kind of talk about it a little bit. And then that's due Tuesday as well. Reminder, the quarter officially ends Tuesday, November 6th, which is Election Day, at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then if you could take time to complete the student evaluations that you receive in your email. Okay, and then you know why my motto is adversity to springboard to success. Let's take a look at the course calendar. For the final time this quarter. Okay, let's get some of this stuff out of there. There's some extra stuff in there. Let's take the 250 out. You should just have left here we go, the J100. Okay, so anyway, your reading assignment for the week, and then your initial post, reply post, and then your final exam will be due on the 6th. On the 6th, okay? I'm not talking about week 5. I'm talking about week 6, because this is what this lecture is about. Okay? So let's look at the final module. Again, going over the assignments. It's actually the discussion post. And then your final 50 questions. 50 questions, timed. Okay? Basically, you have 2 minutes per question. And how should you prepare for this? By using the PowerPoint as an outline and guide, and making sure that you've done all your assignments, so you can make sure that you've done it. You cannot take this after midnight. That is that's when it's due, and it actually should say it right here. If I click on it, it says 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Okay, and once you start it, you can't stop it. Okay. So, how do you prepare for this quiz? As I've taught before and told students, I say the best thing you can do is look at the PowerPoints and the materials that you had here. There is no special study guide prepared because it's only 5.5 weeks, 6 weeks. But I have been saying to you each week that if you did the studying of the assignments the way that they were written out, that you would be prepared for the final exam, because the final exam covers the full course that you've had, the topics that you've written about, and it explains all the things that you should be completing, okay, or have completed. Then you'll have until that same day to submit the keyword that I'll be giving you for a live lecture. All right. So now let's look at the lesson content. Juvenile justice is what we're going to talk about. I already told you what your reading was, and we're going to talk about the lecture notes. The lecture notes, okay? And then you have your practice activity, and you're going to use this to help you prepare for the final. A person who is below the minimum age to be considered a legal adult. This can vary by state, but usually 17 years of age is the oldest juvenile. So who is a person who is below the minimum age to be considered a legal adult? So if you type in or minor, you should come right there at it. Let's see what it says. You type juvenile minor, the answer was juvenile. So then you click continue. Behavior that violates criminal law, juvenile status offenses, and other rules directed specifically at juveniles. So then you'll type in that, and then you will go from there. So anyway, those are some of the things. So let's talk about the juvenile justice system. And you should be aware that the juvenile justice system is different in some parts from the adult system. First of all, when a juvenile is charged, they are not indicted. There's no grand jury involved, and so each of the states have a different type of system. However, generally, that individual is taken in, and that individual is, how should I say, placed under control of the court. The system is closed to the public. Public is generally not allowed, and we don't call them criminals. We call them delinquents. And as a result of that, what we're doing is trying to rehabilitate the individual, trying to help the individual. And so those individuals that find themselves in that situation, we will oftentimes let you know that the records that come out of these kinds of situations they're sealed, and they are not um, allowed to be received in an adult court. The theory of the judge stepping in and operating as the parent for the individual. And so we find ourselves in a situation where the individual is adjudicated in the process. That's the term that's used. And that if an individual is found to be delinquent, sometimes because the acts are very violent, there are times when juveniles are charged as adults. And it's a debate issue because of the fact that we're still trying to salvage juveniles. So the idea is that a 12-year-old, as it says, who steals a pair of athletic shoes should be treated the same way as a 17-year-old who commits murder. That's a question. Many people say that rehabilitation doesn't work, but these are the same people that say rehabilitation doesn't work in adult court, and that violent offenders must be punished the same as adults. However, in order to try an individual as an adult, there are waiver hearings or processes that every state has for determining when to transfer the juvenile into adult court. And usually it's the prosecution that will, of course, ask for that. So if, for example, a juvenile is charged with assault or murder filed in juvenile court, however, though some states allow them, the court may waive the jurisdiction in the violent cases and allow the case to be transferred to adult court. Then the person is prosecuted as an adult and subject to the same punishment as an adult. So in a juvenile setting, it is not as severe. And you should be aware of the fact that in the juvenile justice system, individuals are kept in custody or sentenced with keeping in mind that when they reach adulthood, that oftentimes they will be released. So if they're tried though as adults, then they will not. They will serve the sentence that is the same that an adult would receive. And so in juvenile justice system, for example, one of the rights that's not guaranteed to an individual is the right to a jury trial. Inroduction is a case that established that. And so juveniles find themselves in the situation where they will be tried as adults, and if they're tried as adults, then they have a jury trial. But there's no juries in the juvenile justice system. There's no constitutional right. There is no right to a jury trial. Again, that was settled already. There is issues, most of the issues, such as the right to be released on bail or the right to cross-examine or to face their accusers. The courts, though, are closed generally to the public because to protect the minor from public scrutiny. And oftentimes, when a charge is made, it won't necessarily have the actual name of the individual to protect that individual there. It's not people of the state of Illinois versus it would be in re whoever that person would be in that situation. So the juvenile justice system is designed to help the individual to rehabilitate themselves and find a situation where they are not charged. Now, I want to share something with you that is actually outside of this thing here. I want to let me see if I can do it over here. let's go to, and I want to go to this, and I want you to see some details. Okay, this is another class, but I want to share the information with you. Okay. This is about the juvenile offender. Now, here we go. This is the stuff I want to point out to you. In the juvenile justice system, individuals are taken into custody but not arrested. This is the vernacular that we use. And you see the differences here. They're detained but not jailed, adjudicated but not found guilty, and given a disposition, not a sentence. And so, as I said earlier, the judge steps in, and it talks about, it goes back to the British term parens patriae, where in Britain the kings would step in and take over the lives of the children and protect their welfare. Well, the juvenile court does the same thing as well. Probation is often ordered in juvenile court and handled by juvenile probation officers. And there's an investigation report that takes place to determine, the history of the juvenile and to determine what level of risk or what needs that could be provided to help that juvenile. And then the juvenile may be required to report to the probation officer. However, the probation officer works very closely with the family in juvenile court as opposed to adult court. In the adult court, they work directly with the defendant. In this case, remember, there is no defendant involved here, okay? It's not called defendant. Now, it might mean the same kind of thing in reality in terms of application, but it is not the same. And the reason is because, keep in mind, when you're dealing with juveniles, you're looking at juveniles from the perspective of rehabilitation as the goal, okay? So juveniles can be placed in group homes, wilderness program boot camps, and some even in secure detention centers. Again, that's what they call them, detention centers, not jails. And even when they get to the prison part, there's a juvenile part where juveniles are sentenced, okay? Now, when a serious offense happens, as we already kind of talked about that, and they can be waived for adult court. I already told you about that. But it has to be very, very, very serious. Prison could be the outcome in a situation like that. And in the issues of youth in adult prisons, though, create the same issues that you run into in the adult court, adult prisons, crowding, overcrowding, violence, and then even sometimes exploitation by adult offenders, which they might have minimal contact with, but any amount of contact is bad for a juvenile because all they will do is teach that juvenile bad habits, and then they will end up becoming adult offenders. So there's a lot of states that are trying to deal with house arrest, electronic monitoring system situations as alternatives to incarcerating that. Now, let me point out to you that I want you to see this. You will see it, the cases I was talking about. Okay, so this is how juvenile justice has derived, and these are some Supreme Court cases that you should be aware of, and you should run into them in your reading. It says in Kent versus the United States, 1966 case, the courts provide due process in transferring juveniles to the adult system. In other words, they have a right to a hearing and those things of that nature. In 1967, this is the one I talked about. I said Inroduction, hearings that could result in commitment to an institution Juveniles have four basic constitutional rights: the right to notification, the right to confirm witnesses, the right against self-incrimination, and the right to counsel. That's what Inroduction stands for. Okay, that was what I wanted to talk to you about. But coming up here to 19, I think it's later, further on, 70 is juveniles must be proved guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. This is the one I was thinking of, McKeever, a 71 case. Jury trials are not constitutionally required in juvenile hearings, not the Galt case. So it's the McKeever case, McKeever versus Pennsylvania, which stands for the proposition that juveniles are not entitled to jury trials. Then moving along to 75, Reed versus Jones, waiver of juvenile to criminal court. Following adjudication in juvenile to criminal court, after being adjudicated in juvenile court, can't be done because it would be a violation of double jeopardy. In other words, the individual will be tried twice for the same offense. And Reed versus Jones stands for the proposition that juveniles also have the protection of double jeopardy that's in the Constitution as well, and not to be tried twice for the same offense. Smith versus Daily Mail Publishing. The press can report juvenile court cases in some instances, but again, when the press does it, they are going to protect the privacy of the juvenile. It's not the same as them sitting in open court, but they do have a right in certain limited situations. The court can always overrule that. In Eadings versus Oklahoma, a defendant's age is considered in determining whether to apply the death penalty. Now, that's the way it was in '82. Okay, so you can. This is a little history lesson on it, but when we get to 2005, you're going to see that we resolved that issue once and for all. In '84, preventative pretrial detention is allowed under certain circumstances. In other words, you can be held in custody and not released. The minimum age for the death penalty was set at 16 in 1988 in the Thompson versus Oklahoma. But you can forget that because of this case. Roper versus Simmons, the minimum age for the death penalty is set at 18. Therefore, and it's resolved that juveniles cannot receive the death penalty. Even if you try them as adults, you still can't sentence them to death and the death penalty if there's a death penalty in the state. Some states don't have the death penalty, so it's not an issue, but this is only in those states that has the death penalty. So some of the terms that I want you to be familiar with are parents, patriae. So you flip that over, a Latin term, wherein the English king established the right to intervene in the lives of children in their monarchy. So the court steps in. Next, juvenile delinquent. Remember, minors who violate, and understand minors who violate the law or incorrigible, truant, or runaway. These are delinquents. Remember, that's what we call them. Status offender is one who engages in conduct as illegal only because of their age. And this applies in juvenile court. Because of their age. Community treatment, where we provide care for the individual treatment, such as when we're dealing with probation, counseling, restitution. We might provide drug treatment and things of that nature, other than incarcerating the individual. Institutional treatment is where the person is in a facility operated by the state or county through staff monitoring, locked exits, and interior fence. Basically, they are incarcerated to receive treatment. Residential programs, where placement for social services, things that are needed in situations where the individuals can be placed in group homes, family group homes, wilderness programs, boot camps, things to try to turn the juvenile around. Non-residential programs, programs for juvenile offenders that don't confine them overnight. Aftercare, equivalency of parole, same thing. When they're still on under supervision of the court, and that the probation officer continues to deal with them, and they can, if they do something wrong, or as we use the term, catch a case, they could end up going back to the detention center. Judicial waiver, this has to do with transferring to adult court. And like I said, various jurisdictions and states have different processes. But due process is a right that the individual has to fight it if they want to. Social investigation, this is equivalent to the pre-sentence investigation where you check the background to determine the history of the individual as far as having contact with the court or the criminal justice system. Statutory exclusion states that automatically transfer offenders to juvenile court for certain offenses. And then some of those have been fought, but they've been very successful and are ruled not unconstitutional, as some people have argued that it violates due process. And that's the end of that exercise, okay? So I just wanted to share that information with you in terms of dealing with juveniles. Again, that's in another class, but I wanted to share that with you, okay? So now we are back into the classroom, and it's about almost 8 o'clock, and I'm going to tell you that when you prepare for the exam, and I've looked at it again, the final thing I'm going to say is this, is how do you prepare? It's very easy. I started telling you to get prepared from week 1. If you do the assignments, you will remember, because it's not really that tricky. It's really straight from the material that you studied and utilizing the PowerPoints. And again, I will send you the PowerPoints right after this, and then I will be posting the archive of this. So the key word, and the final key word that I'm looking for is juvenile justice. That's it, juvenile justice. So if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to me. The material that I gave you that's in addition to that will help you also to prepare for the final exam. So you might want to take time to look at this lecture to help you get ready for the final exam. Okay? And with that, I'm going to end this session and say good night.